Welcome to our garden. This is going to be a short tour of our autumn garden because it's autumn here in Tasmania, and look, I have to confess, I don't think I am a very good autumn gardener. You may be. There are some really great autumn gardeners, and in some parts of the world I think lend themselves better to autumn gardening. I think my wife is a better autumn gardener than I am, because as I look around the flower garden, there is some sections that are still showing some really good colour. And of course, nature adds its own colour this time of the year that really delights us. It's really nice to see those colours. In this video, we'll go and take a short look around the veggie garden, see what's happening, see what I haven't done and what I need to do. And we'll also have a little bit of a look at what Elizabeth's been doing in the flower garden. Now, the first thing that you'll probably notice here in the main veggie garden is the corn is still standing. I haven't come back to actually clean it up. I find this time of the year, as we're busy progressively in harvesting the different sections that come through, it's tomatoes are always a big job, and then of course apples have been the one that we've only just finished picking at the beginning of this week. We picked the last of the apples. That I tend to focus on that harvest and tend to miss coming back for some of the planting that I could do and some of the cleanup that does need to be done. Now, what will I do with this corn? I would really like to have a mulcher of some sort to actually process it, because it does take a long time to compost, even though it would make really good compost. I don't currently have that mulcher to do it, so I tend to just cut it down and chop it up a bit before putting it into the compost heap, where it does eventually break down. It's a good thing to put at the base of the compost, where it's still going to be nice and open and going to get maximum time in my heap, at least, because I don't turn it. The worms will break it down over that time. And of course the tomatoes are still in the same situation. The vines are now dead. I have picked the last of the tomatoes. We still are eating a few of the ones that are left, but there's not very many now. They'll soon be over. Most of the tomato crop, which was from the Roma style tomatoes, has been processed, either bottled, made into relish or sauce, and we will consume that for the next 12 months. They did really well, and I think I'll repeat that same variety again. I have kept seed from it because I was really happy with it. It was really sweet tomato, and that's really great for processing, and just even for eating it was quite acceptable to use in a salad. So I need to come in here and clean these up now. I need to clean it all away, and so that's one of the jobs that I'm going to be getting around to in the next week or so. This whole area with the corn and the tomatoes, I'll clean it up and probably put plastic over it for the winter. I may put some green manure in. I haven't really thought about that too much yet. It'll then sit until spring, where it'll be ready for me to cultivate and get into production again. Here in the raised beds is the one area where I have put in some effort, because the things that I can grow across autumn and winter often are more suited to the smaller areas and the raised beds, or in the greenhouse, which is the main area that I plant from now on. The one section that hasn't had any attention is the asparagus, which I need to come back and clean up as well. But you'll see this plant beside me. This is a perennial kale. There's a couple here that have done quite well. They've produced a lot of seed across the summer. I have collected some of that seed. A lot of it has fallen on the ground, and if you look down under here, you'll see there are a lot of plants actually germinating. Now I'm going to let some go. Most of it will probably be harvested as a microgreen. I really like plants like this that will self-seed, and that you don't have to spend the time actually germinating and planting. So if you can keep that cycle going. This perennial kale produced for us last winter, and it's coming now back for a second winter, the same plants. And look, it wasn't much across summer. It just produced seed, and I did have some problems with aphids with it, but it has survived and working. So if you've got some vertical space in your garden, which most of us do, a plant like this is pretty good to have. Now this bed here, I had zucchinis in it across the summer, and in the spring and early summer there was also some lettuce, and the lettuce I allowed to go to seed. So now there's heaps of lettuce plants coming up. There's also a couple of the perennial kale plants there as well. But earlier this week, when it was a little bit drizzly, I actually did come in and transplanted some of the larger lettuce plants into another bed, and they will hopefully give us a little bit of lettuce pretty soon because it grows fairly quickly. I'll probably fairly shortly take some more of these plants and put them into the greenhouse, and that'll give us a little bit of lettuce across winter. Now this lettuce was the Simpsons or Australian yellow. I had both seeds planted. As far as I could see, they're both identical. I couldn't see a difference between them. So I'm going to account them as a single variety. I'm not going to use all these plants. What I will do in this bed is plant the back section of it with the snow peas, and that should happen within the next month, probably a couple of weeks. I'll get it done, and I'll allow some of the lettuce here in the front, maybe the kale, to actually grow. The things that are growing in the front probably won't be long term, and by springtime they'll come out and be planted with something else. In this corner you'll see the silver beet, which is continuing to grow, and we'll continue to harvest that right through winter, both for ourselves, and also some of it goes to the hens. They enjoy some as well. I generally plant in spring with the silver beet and get a whole year basically growing out of it. The lettuce that I planted the other day, and over here there's carrots which we have been progressively digging. There's lots more there than probably we need, but we will use those across winter, probably more than we have so far. I did have some beetroot here, but it was overshadowed by the silver beet plant that went to seed, and I allowed to go to seed there. And that meant that the beetroot was really poor. It just did not like being completely overshadowed by such a large plant. You'll see the odd parsnip around in the garden. I allow those to self-seed and plant themselves, and we harvest them as we need. We don't eat a lot of parsnips, but the few that we do enjoy. The one planting I did get to do really in autumn, or early autumn, was to put in some broccoli here, and it's done really nicely. As you see, nice big plants. It was under netting earlier because you need to keep the white butterfly off in its early stages. We harvested a really good first crop. There were heads like this, challenging, bigger than many cauliflowers actually. And we've now picked some of the secondary heads. There's still a few around in here coming, and of course I'll leave this. It will probably come to a third stage and maybe even a fourth. I will though be planting some more broccoli in the greenhouse because that's where I find that I can grow it across winter. Down this end is the leeks, and they're doing really well. We are now harvesting them, coming in from the back here, and we will harvest them from now on across winter. We tend to stage our leeks so they come ready in autumn and winter. This is one punnet of leeks that I did purchase. I didn't grow it myself, but just one punnet spaced out, and look, it produces more leeks than we actually need. We give a few away as well, and there's often half a dozen left at the end of the season that don't get used and start to go to seed. But it's really nice to have them, and they're really enjoyable to consume, making soups or stews or stir fries across the cooler time of the year. Through these couple of beds you'll see the spring onions here that have got pretty large. They're quite amazing size. They're going to start going to seed once, well, there's even one there now, but certainly towards spring they will start to pop up a lot of seed heads. We basically didn't get to use them all, and at this stage you can use them, but they are a little bit more like using a leek or an onion because of the size. So they will get used progressively across winter, or a fair few of them will at least, and they might give some seed that we can start some more from. There is some English spinach in here that's self-seeded from the last crop, and I allowed to come up. We've picked a little bit off that, but it's looking pretty sad now and not really going to come to much because it's getting a bit cool for it. Again, in the end there's some parsnips. Now this bed, the climbing beans have finished production and there is drying seed on them. I need to come and actually pick some of that seed off, and once I've done that, really I could pull this right away, clean this up. There's some parsnips again, but I'm not going to really be planting anything in this bed, I think, until springtime. So I'm not really in any hurry to do those jobs. Now here you'll see this section, which was potatoes, I have planted with garlic. Now the proper garlic has come through along with lots and lots of weeds, as you'll see. Now I need to come through, clean those weeds up a little bit. There is only just beginning to show the elephant garlic. I can see one over there. You can't really see any others yet. It does take quite a few weeks for the elephant garlic to come through. You put it in and you go, is it going to happen? I'm not sure. And when you've just about given up on it is when it actually comes through. The proper garlic, of course, jumps out pretty quickly. In a couple of weeks you've got some germination. On my left is the summer potato crop, which I haven't started digging yet. We had so many from here that we're almost finished now, and I will need to dig these, and I really would like to get these out over the next month, get them out of the ground. I also have a autumn potato crop that's succession for this, and that will be dug later in winter. Now you see this plant here, this is a perpetual spinach, and there's another one up back at the fence there as well. I grew some perpetual spinach quite a few years ago, and I haven't planted any since, but I do allow a couple of plants to grow and go to seed. And so it's basically a weed in this section of the garden, and a weed that I really don't mind having because it does provide that little bit of green which can fill some gaps. Now I'm not personally the greatest fan of perpetual spinach as a food to eat. I find it a little bit lacking in flavour, but if you haven't got other greens around, it's here and so easy to grow because it'll just act like a weed. As I was coming by, I wanted to show you the cherry guava tree here. I made a video when I planted it. I'm trying to remember when I actually did it. It was probably about a year ago that I put it out now, and it was only a small plant at the time, and you can see it's popping its head above the bag and got really nice growth in there. I will leave this around for the winter, but then once spring comes I'll take this off, and by then it should be a good size and ready to go on its own. But I'm really happy with its growth, and I think it's going to be a good successful plant here. Now this is one bed that I actually did get to do something with in terms of cleaning up. It had broad beans and it had some cabbages in it, and I cleaned it up and put in some green manure. Now there's a mix in here of oats, some mustard, some peas, some broad beans, so quite a variety of seeds in here, and of course lots of weeds coming up as well. Once it gets up around about 6 or 8 inches, I will come over it with black plastic and just let it mulch down across the winter, and it'll then be ready for some spring planting. It is a fairly wet area here, so that's one of the reasons why I tend not to do any actual winter gardening down in this area, because it is the bottom of our hill, sort of against the fence here, and the runoff comes down here in winter. So yes, much better to leave it fallow across the winter time. So here in the greenhouse, where I'm doing some watering at the moment, because while it might be damp enough outside, I have to remember to actually keep watering in here because it's not going to rain in here. There's a mix of some areas that have been cleaned up and some planted, some ready to be planted, and some still with the old growth in, such as these tomatoes. There's still tomatoes that can be harvested out of here, but most of the vines are dying back now. So it's not going to be very long and I come and actually clean that messy looking area up and make it look much tidier. There is still a few capsicums on, not very many though now. They still show growth, and so I'll keep them going as long as I can. The jalapeno, I still need to pick a lot of that and perhaps dry or process the crop in some way. There's an area there where the cucumbers were and I've cleaned out, which I will plant with something else soon. This bed up here, which looks to be empty, has been planted with potatoes. So a winter crop of potatoes, and that should get going fairly soon. We'll start to see them come through the ground. And this bed up in the corner, which is empty, I will plant with some broccoli, and that may happen in a few days' time. But here is the one place that over winter we can get some good growth. The broccoli will do well, the potatoes will do well, and I will plant more potatoes in the back bed, which is pretty empty at the moment. Actually, I'll bring you up and let you have a look at that. In this bed, which was pretty wild across summer, it was pretty much chaos, things going to seed. I've still got some parsley in here, which is looking nice, and lots of seed germination. Now, most of this seed is weed, but up in the corner here is some parsley seed germinating, and that's what I'm really after. I may also get some lettuce plants out of it as well, but that parsley is the main thing that I'm after, and in the next few weeks that'll come up and I'll get some plants out of that to carry on. And then I'll plant this with potatoes for some more winter potatoes, and I might experiment with those a little bit, so that might be something for a video. Now, as I mentioned, there are still a couple of nice colourful sections in Elizabeth's flower garden, and I think this is the highlight of it, with this sage in flower along with the chrysanthemum, and still a rose or two as well. It's looking really nice and at its peak, really, this section. Elizabeth has done quite a bit of cleanup in here, and one of those things that she's done is actually trim back our lavenders. Now, the lavender variety we have is one that we haven't really been able to identify as to what it's called, but it flowers a lot across winter and early spring, but particularly winter if you come in autumn and cut it back. And that's what Elizabeth's done, and so it doesn't look very attractive right now. It looks rather sticky and rough, but it will soon come out with new growth. Well, the new growth is coming now, and it will then follow with some flower across winter and look really nice. Now, Elizabeth has also been busy with her propagation and raising some new plants for late autumn, winter, even and spring planting. I'll let her show you what she's been doing there in the propagation house.
It's autumn time here, and I thought I would show you all the things that I do this time of year. And it is a really nice rainy day today. We haven't had rain lately, and so I thought, oh, this is a good opportunity under the cover here to enjoy my moment. And so I wanted to share with you what I do with my little seedlings. And so everybody's would have seen these little seedling trays. I use those, and I have just fly mesh here, like your house fly mesh, and I cut that to fit, and I will top it up with my potting mix, and then I will sprinkle my seeds in there. And so that's what I've done with all these here. Here I have hollyhocks that I've been thinning out. I'm yet to do more. And I have propagation box that you would find at a garden centre, but the rest I've sort of make up my own thing because of what I had at the time. But this one's got Flanders poppies. You can see every seed went well. Sometimes you put seeds in, nothing happens, but this time went really, really well. So you've got your hollyhocks, and here I've got Iceland poppies. And with that, with the homemade kind of idea, I put these little lids over. It's just plastic Tupperware, as you see, and this one you saw. And I find it's really a good idea. The seeds grow really fast because it warms them slightly. You do have to check occasionally to see that it hasn't dried out, but pretty much it's like a sweat house, and it just drops water from there, sweating in there. And here I have Flanders poppies as well, so you can see that went really well. I've just got the little sticks there to stop the wind blowing the lid off. Yeah, I find it, over the years I've worked out that this is a really good idea, and just to warm the seedlings slightly, and they just take off really, really well because the weather cools off. You do have to be aware in the summertime they don't get too hot and burn or dry out. I've never had any fails. It just works so well.
Now, some of you may recall that we redeveloped this corner of our garden in springtime. There were trees like the magnolia here and a couple of rhododendrons. We mulched this whole area, and Elizabeth planted a lot more plants into it. So it's basically pine bark mulch. It was put down with newspaper under it, and a lot of perennial planting into it. And things have really grown fantastically in this area across the summer. They really loved the fact that we mulched it all. Even the existing plants put on a huge amount of extra growth, and the new ones really sprang up as well. There's not a lot of colour happening in here right now, but there's good growth, and it bodes for a really nice spring. So that's a little tour of what's happening in our garden at the moment. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with some more videos when there's more action happening.